Greetings, YouTubes. In internet terms, I'm Methuselah. I'm 59 years old. I am an old, as my friend Amy likes to point out to me. And I have been around long enough to remember quite distinctly what the world was like before we had all of the internet stuff. I can remember looking at science fiction and seeing all of the marvelous interconnections that were possible because of their technology that we just didn't have. Uh, Star Trek, of course, was the one that sits most firmly in my mind. I'm old enough to have remembered watching the third season of the original series when it first ran, um, and I don't remember a lot of it, but I do remember a few of the episodes. And it was just the idea of having a computer you could talk to and it responds back. And now we have that. For good or ill, we have that. Of course, they also make really good listening devices, which is why I don't have any of those things in my house. I don't want appliances that are interconnected to the internet. I don't want that kind of thing at all. The only connections I have to the internet are things that I deliberately do. For example, my computer, my phone, things like that. Those are things I intentionally want. I don't want the world around me to know what's going on just because I walk into a room. The idea of an interconnected home of where everything responds to your presence is a great idea, and I find it deeply terrifying now at 59. But one of the things I find fascinating is that before the internet, to find yourself connected to the people that had the same interests as you do, the really niche subcultures, was not easy. It was difficult to achieve. You could maybe pick up things from magazines or zines, if you're anyone who remembers zines, little magazines made out of, you know, copy paper that's been folded in half and stapled together. That thing people threw together. I have some zines kicking around my house somewhere because those are the things that a person could make on their own and disseminate to folks. If you got lucky, if you were a gamer, there was a gaming store close to you. Maybe you weren't lucky. Maybe the best you could have, and for me, the best I had for a long time was just being able to buy the Dragon magazine at a magazine stand, buying comics at a magazine stand, because at the time we didn't even have a comic store. I didn't have a comic store until I was, let's see now, um, 20, I think, was when we first got a comic store in my town. So, a long time ago. Uh, but now you have gaming stores all over the place. I can think of just two within ready access to me in my city or right just outside my city. But finding those little niche connections was difficult, and even more difficult if you didn't know where you belonged. You didn't know the connections you wanted to make. And some of those connections were positive. Like, for example, furries being able to communicate with each other because they found the network of people through zines and magazines and through newsletters, all that existed in the real meat space and not on the internet. But it also meant that it was difficult for the racists to find each other. Those things are generational, so sometimes you had family connections that reached back over time. But it wasn't as easy for folks to spontaneously be indoctrinated into that, you know, vile worldview as it is today. At one time, I was a member of the World Atlatl Association. I never owned an atlatl. I still don't. I'd like to make one. Um, but I thought it was so absolutely preposterous that I became a member just because I wanted the patch and I wanted to be able to say I was a member of the World Atlatl Association. An atlatl is a stick that's designed to help you throw uh, light javelins or large darts, depends on how you want to look at them. Um, and that was interesting and cool. But now we have the internet, and it's much easier for us to find each other. When my mother got online, one of the things she wanted to do is she wanted to find folks that were into fiber arts because she's been into fiber arts her entire life. sewing and knitting and crocheting and needlepoint and all kinds of stuff like that. She's been doing that her whole life, and she's quite good at it. She has produced some clothing items that are of absolute tailor, bespoke tailor quality. I have a cloak, a full length wool cloak that she put together for me. That just it's wonderful. Um, she wanted to find folks that were discussing cross stitching, and she found a group because she did a search for cross stitch, which was a group of people that are cross dressers, specifically men that dress as women. And they're not trans; they're just men that dress as women. And they were all because she had a little icon of her face, and they were all very impressed with how convincing she was. And then she realized what they were discussing, and it was not Piper Hearts. It was an innocent encounter. It didn't cause any harm. But those folks were able to connect together because of the internet far more easily than they would have before it existed. Unfortunately, it also means conspiracy theorists out there can connect with each other, the flat earthers and the anti-vaxxers. It means that it's easier for people to be indoctrinated into like the alt-right, to the neo-Nazi groups, because the access is so readily available. When they first started posting reels on YouTube, I did an experiment. I went in cold. I did absolutely no searching on there. I just started scrolling through the information. And in very short order, I was being fed things that were definitely in the conservative right worldview because of my demographics and because of some of my interests. But the problem is my interests are incredibly broad. I mean, look at my channel. I cover a lot of stuff on my channel. It's one of the bad things about Instagram and the reels on YouTube. I can't do searches for everything I'm interested in because then that is the only thing I will be fed, those things. I don't want to be fed one source of information. I want to be fed all the things, which is one of the reasons I love Tumblr so much. Scrolling through people's Tumblrs has exposed me to many different things without having me get sucked into the algorithm just feeding me what they think I want. I may be looking at someone else feeding me what they want, but I have many different options. There are lots of people on Tumblr I visit on a regular basis, different people's Tumblr pages for that reason. And yes, there is a certain degree of self-selection there because I'm following people that that have a lot in common, or I think I have a lot in common with. I'm quite fond of lesbian and queer women because we have a lot in common when it comes to interests. We both tend to be intersectional feminists. We both happen to like women. Um, we both tend to be progressive. So yeah, I have a lot of overlap there with lesbians of the world. Um, and quite frankly, sometimes we also dress very much the same. Um, Finding people was hard in the past. Finding people now is easy. And that's good and bad. It was good and bad in the past, and it's good and bad in the future. When you couldn't make the connections, it meant people that shouldn't be connected to each other couldn't be connected to each other. But it also meant that people that desperately needed to be in contact with other folks because of their niche interests, whether it was some just very mundane hobby like flint napping or something more deeply personal that they needed to express, as the folks in the LGBT community had a hard time connecting with each other unless you were in a big city. But it also meant it was hard for the white nationalists to connect to each other as easily as they can now. Remember, the folks on January 6th arrived wearing T-shirts celebrating the day. They only could do that because they met each other through this space and were able to make those connections and do the planning. So in the age before connections with through the internet, the world was good and bad. And now the world is good and bad. And I don't know if the degree of good and badness has changed. The rate of connections has accelerated. The degree of connections has accelerated. We are immersed in a world of data that I couldn't even dream of as a child. And as a neurodivergent person who is addicted to data, This is wonderful. This is terrifying. But it's not boring now, is it?